Good afternoon. Last night in the debate, I reminded Canadians that nobody asked for this election. We didn't call it. Justin Trudeau forced an election in the middle of a pandemic. Once again, he put himself ahead of others. But regardless, Canada was asked to choose its path, and Canada's Conservatives answered that challenge. Les Canadiens ne voulaient pas de l'élection. On ne l'a pas demandé. Elle nous a été imposée en pleine pandémie. Mais peu importe, on a demandé au Canada de choisir sa voie. Et les conservateurs ont relevé le défi. We wanted to do things differently, not with the politics of fear or division, but with a clear plan to unify the country and kickstart our recovery. 4 weeks ago, I released Canada's recovery plan, a clear and detailed set of promises, of commitments to get Canada back on track, to recover 1 million jobs, to tackle Canada's mental health crisis with a new mental health action plan, to protect the health of Canadians with nearly $60 billion for healthcare over the next 10 years, to build 1 million new homes, to clean up the mess in Ottawa, and to give families and seniors a break from inflation and skyrocketing costs, and to balance the budget over the next decade. Il y a 4 semaines, j'ai présenté le plan de rétablissement du Canada. Ce sont mes engagements pour remettre le Canada sur les rails. C'est agir pour récupérer 1 million d'emplois, agir contre la crise de la santé mentale avec un nouveau plan d'action, agir pour protéger la santé des Canadiens avec 60 milliards de dollars par année au cours des 10 prochaines années. Agir pour construire 1 million de nouveaux logements. Agir pour faire le ménage à Ottawa et s'assurer que le gouvernement travaille pour vous. Agir pour équilibrer le budget au cours de la prochaine décennie. Agir contre la hausse des prix de l'essence, de l'épicerie et du logement. Et agir pour s'attaquer à la pénurie de main-d'œuvre qui frappe tous les secteurs et toutes les régions. Canadians need to know what they're getting. They need to know that their leaders will deliver on their promises. So that's the plan a Conservative government would deliver starting on day one. 4 weeks ago, when Mr. Trudeau stood up and broke his promise to not call an election during a pandemic, he asked the country to give him a majority. He said that the reason was this was a pivotal moment. I expected we would have the debate Canadians deserved about the future of this country. That's why day after day I've been traveling across Canada, talking to Canadians about the struggles they face to pay their bills, to afford their first home, to secure a dependable retirement. And that's why in Canada's recovery plan, I've been laying out policy after policy to get our recovery kick-started. I expected Mr. Trudeau to engage on ideas for the future, to provide some vision, any vision for the country. Like many Canadians, I was disappointed. What have we seen from Mr. Trudeau instead? Acting like he was entitled to a majority. No agenda for the future, no positivity, no plans. Je m'attendais à ce que M. Trudeau partage des idées, qu'il offre une vision, du moins une vraie vision pour le pays, pas seulement des séances d'improvisation. Comme beaucoup de Canadiens, j'ai été déçu. Qu'est-ce que M. Trudeau offre? Absolument rien. Pas de programme pour l'avenir, rien de positif, pas de plan, seulement des dettes et plus de division. Day after day of relentless negativity when things look like they wouldn't work out for him. A campaign based purely on seeking to divide Canadians on issue after issue, with no concern about the damage he does to our trust, our institutions, our democracy, so long as he gets what he wants. Nothing illustrates the arrogance and entitlement of Mr. Trudeau more. He called an election in the middle of a pandemic, not because the Liberal government had a vision to build Canada back up and unite our country, not because they had a plan for our economic recovery, not because an election was needed, but because he thought he would get a majority. Justin Trudeau came to power promising a new way of doing things. You remember, he promised sunny ways. He said he rejected the politics of division and was offering hope and hard work. Where did that Justin Trudeau go? All he has done in this campaign is try to divide Canada at a time when the country is crying out for unity. And after 6 years of letting Canadians down time after time, we know his ambition is never matched with achievements. Pour prendre le pouvoir, Justin Trudeau avait promis une nouvelle façon de faire les choses, une nouvelle façon de faire de la politique. Il disait qu'il détestait la politique de division. Mais qu'a fait Justin Trudeau en réalité? Tout ce qu'il a fait depuis le début de la campagne, c'est de diviser le Canada. Il cherche à diviser le pays au moment même où on a besoin d'unité. All we've seen from Mr. Trudeau is more scaremongering, more spending, higher taxes, more broken promises, and no solutions. Prices are rising, our debt is rising, and our economy is shrinking. Canadians deserve better. You deserve better. There is 1 week of this campaign to go, and Canadians face a choice. Right from the start of this campaign, we've shown what a vote for the Conservatives will get you, that our sole focus will be on getting Canada back on track, economic recovery, mental health action, more jobs, more money for healthcare, getting spending under control, bringing the country together instead of seeking to divide it. Dès le début de la campagne, on a montré les avantages d'un vote conservateur. Notre objectif est de remettre le Canada sur les rails, relance économique, action en santé mentale, plus d'emplois, plus d'argent pour la santé, contrôle des dépenses, respecter les compétences provinciales, unir le pays au lieu de le diviser. Our mission and the plan, the commitment, the promise, and the team to follow it through. We've put it all out there so you, the Canadian people, can decide what kind of country you want to live in. We've shown you that we are a new party. We are a changed party, and we're here to earn your trust and to earn your support. Justin Trudeau and the NDP, they've given us more of the same. As much as Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Singh pretend otherwise, there's no real difference between them at all. The same uncontrollable spending, borrowing and debt, the same cost of living crisis, the same economic decline, the same division, the same entitlement, the same. Under Justin Trudeau, we've had a shrinking economy and rising prices, something Canada hasn't seen for more than 40 years. So to every Canadian, with just over 1 week to go, we face a choice. Canada's recovery plan or more of the same. If you place your faith in me, I will fight tirelessly for mental health, for better services, for lower prices, for more jobs, and for Canadians everywhere, whether east or west, rural, suburban or urban, anglophone or francophone. Il ne reste qu'une semaine. On doit faire un choix. Le plan de rétablissement du Canada ou M. Trudeau et ses alliés M. Blanchet et M. Singh. Si vous me faites confiance, je fais me battre pour vous. Je fais me battre pour la santé mentale, pour des meilleurs services, pour des prix plus bas et pour de bons emplois payants. Aussi, je vais me battre pour tous les Canadiens, pour les gens des Maritimes, du Centre, des Prairies et du Pacifique, pour les gens des régions rurales, des centres urbains et du Grand Nord canadien, pour les francophones, les anglophones, les communautés autochtones et les nouveaux arrivants. To all of you, I ask this. Who do you trust with your personal economic security? Put your faith in Canada's Conservatives. Vote for Canada's recovery plan. Vote to secure the future. Vote to bring Canada together. Vote Conservative. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
We will now be taking questions. Allons maintenant prendre les questions. Première question.
Oui, bonjour, M. O'Toole, Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada. Sur la première question qui a été posée hier soir au débat en anglais à M. Yves-François Blanchette, vous avez critiqué cette question sur Twitter ce matin, mais je serais curieuse, vous, personnellement, là, M. O'Toole, est-ce que vous pensez que la loi 21 est discriminatoire?
Les Québécois ne sont pas racistes. Hier soir, le style de certaines questions était injuste, selon moi. Et on doit avoir un débat sur les idées. Comme vous le savez, je vais toujours respecter les champs des compétences des provinces sur la langue, la culture, la laïcité. C'est une question pour l'Assemblée nationale et je vais toujours respecter ça. Pour moi, je ne déposerai pas une loi comme ça au fédéral, mais on doit travailler ensemble sur les enjeux importants pour les Québécois et les Québécoises. Last night, we saw certain questions that were a little unfair. We have to make sure that we work together and we respect one another. That's why I've said I will never challenge a law passed by the National Assembly of Quebec, by Queen's Park here in Toronto, or by any provincial assembly. We need to work together. That will be my commitment. Quebecers are not racist, and it's unfair to make that sweeping categorization. They made decisions and laws passed by their National Assembly. I will respect that and try and partner as much as possible with premiers to work on priorities in common. I won't introduce a law like Bill 21 federally, and I'll try and find areas we can work together as we have an economic recovery after COVID-19.
Mais M. O'Toole, vous dites que vous êtes personnellement contre la loi 21. Est-ce que c'est parce que vous la jugez discriminatoire? Est-ce que c'est possible d'avoir une réponse claire? Je pense que les Québécois veulent entendre une réponse claire là-dessus, M. O'Toole.
Pour moi, c'est une question de respect. Et je respecte la nation québécoise. Je respecte les décisions de l'Assemblée nationale. Je respecte le Premier ministre Legault. On a une bonne relation et je vais travailler en étroite collaboration avec le Premier ministre Legault et les autres Premiers ministres pour une relance économique. Et c'est possible d'avoir un autre point de vue sur certains sujets, mais d'avoir une approche respectueuse. Ça serait mon approche comme Premier ministre. Un rassembleur, pas comme M. Trudeau avec 6 ans de division.
Next question, please.
Hello, Mr. O'Toole, Joyce Napier, CTV. None of us has a crystal ball, but polls are indicating that the next government is going to be a minority. Those are the polls. So you were asked this question at the French debate, and I'm wondering if you would promise to collaborate with other parties and keep the next parliament going for a full mandate.
We have to work together to fight COVID-19, to rebuild the country, and my intention will be to do that. We put forward a plan to do that, Canada's recovery plan. And the commitment I made in one of the French debates is a commitment I make now to work for Canada, not for the special interests of the Liberal Party. Mr. Trudeau called an election for himself. The parties agreed months ago not to have an election. There's a fourth wave of the pandemic, a crisis in Afghanistan, forest fires in British Columbia, and Mr. Trudeau made it about himself. As Prime Minister, I will always make it about the well-being of our country and its people.
So I want to ask you about the format of the debate yesterday. With so many interventions by the moderator, did you feel that you were given a fair chance to communicate with voters and to challenge the other leaders?
I challenged Mr. Trudeau's record. Clearly, he has ambition, as I said, but never achievements. From the economy to balanced budgets to safe drinking water on reserve to having a transparent by default government. He has let people down time after time after time. So I challenged him on that record of never delivering on what he announces. We spoke about Canada's recovery plan on every day of this campaign, and I will do that until September 20th. Canadians deserve a plan after a difficult 18 months for our country, and they deserve a Prime Minister who will actually deliver on their commitments.
Next question.
Hi, Mr. O'Toole. That's Bill Curry from the Globe and Mail. The Globe published a report this morning showing the children in First Nation communities are dying at dramatically higher rates due to a lack of clear fire code standards and fire prevention funding. How would you address this?
That's a failure. And we have to have a plan of action for that, for safe drinking water, for outcomes in terms of employment and other opportunities for young Indigenous peoples. As I've said consistently, reconciliation is about restoring trust between First Nations and the federal government. I will look to partner and set priorities with Indigenous leaders holding us to account from a governance perspective so we don't keep failing, don't keep making promises like Mr. Trudeau does with no plan to deliver. My sincere goal will be that everything we do is focused on making serious progress on reconciliation.
Now, on another topic, you just said in your opening remarks that this is a new Conservative party and you criticize divisive politics. But you're also presenting yourself in a very different way than you did last year when you ran for the Conservative leadership race. And you used lots of heated rhetoric. You were talking all the time about cancel culture, the radical left, taking back Canada, language that people would say is divisive. So how do you explain to voters who see those clips from just a year ago and they see a completely different candidate this time running for Prime Minister?
I'm running to secure our future after 18 very difficult months of a health and economic crisis unlike we've ever seen before. I'm running to restore trust in the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's office, which with Mr. Trudeau is in a culture of cover-up, constant ethical investigations on Mr. Trudeau's own conduct. I will try and restore trust in our institutions like the Canadian Armed Forces. That's important to me as a veteran. That's why the second pillar of our recovery plan is actually accountability, transparency measures to restore trust. And I would ask Canadians to look at Canada's recovery plan, look at my track record of bringing people together, and vote for uniting the country on a plan to help all Canadians.
Next question.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. JP Tasker, CBC News. Some polls now have the People's Party at double digits in the national polling, including right here in Ontario. One has them at 11% as of a couple days ago. What do you make of Maxime Bernier's rise, and what will you do in the final days of this campaign to blunt his momentum? I imagine if he does have strong support, it could cost you seats because of vote splits.
The last few days of this campaign, I'll be talking about this. Our plan to secure the future, Canada's recovery plan that we will deliver on. Jobs, accountability, mental health, being more prepared in the future, and getting our budget back into balance. I'm running to bring people together, not to divide them. I'm running on a plan to make sure Canada's best days are ahead of us. And I will use every hour we have to show Canadians that they can have a Prime Minister that delivers, that brings people together, and to make sure that we get through this difficult time with a plan for the future. Je vais travailler entre maintenant et le 20 septembre sur ma vision, sur notre plan pour le rétablissement du Canada. On a une campagne positive avec un plan pour notre avenir. Et ça serait mon approche. Un Premier ministre qui va travailler avec les autres paliers du gouvernement sur une relance économique à travers le pays.
I would like to know your thoughts on Mr. Bernier in particular, but I do have to ask another question for a colleague. As you know, the Canadian flags have been at half-mast on federal buildings since May 30th to honor residential school students who never came home. The decision to raise those flags rests with the Prime Minister. If you're elected, how long do you plan to keep the flags lowered, and what will you do if Indigenous leaders oppose bringing them up to full staff?
I have said that this September 30th, the National Day of commemorating truth and reconciliation, we will do that as a country to recommit to reconciliation. And we will then raise our flag as a sign of that commitment of building a strong and better Canada in the future. I've said I'm very proud of our country, despite the scars from our past. As Prime Minister, reconciliation will be core to our government. It's why it was my first question in the House of Commons as opposition leader. We need to make progress, And if you don't love and recommit to your country, are you really going to dig deep to make progress? Unlike Mr. Trudeau, I will not make promises without a plan to deliver. And reconciliation is about trust. And I know First Nation leaders, Indigenous peoples will be able to trust a government that partners with them on the path of reconciliation. Le 30 septembre, on doit reconnaître la journée de la réconciliation. Et après ça, relever notre drapeau national avec un engagement clair sur la réconciliation. C'est un enjeu important pour moi. C'était ma première question dans la Chambre des communes comme chef de l'opposition, la réconciliation. Et on doit agir, pas juste des belles paroles. On doit avoir un plan d'action en partenariat avec les Premières Nations. Ça serait mon approche.
Next question.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. Chris Selly from the National Post. With your platform costing out this week, Canadians will be hearing and seeing a lot in the news about how much less you are planning to spend on childcare than Mr. Trudeau, $2.6 billion versus $30 billion, or roughly 10% as much. I'm wondering what you would say to a potential Conservative voter who is, for whom childcare is a priority, who wonders if they might be making a mistake.
I would say to that voter, we've got your back. Our plan will help your family immediately. And if your family is in a lower income level, we will help with almost 75% of the cost of childcare. If you're a shift worker, some of our nurses, as Mike told me here in Mississauga, burning out, working late shifts, our plan will give you the flexibility to meet your needs. We will allow parents and families to be in the driver's seat to pick the best and most flexible option that helps their family. All families need a plan. With Mr. Trudeau, it's only some, potentially 5 to 6 years from now. Canadian families across this country need support now, and that's what a Conservative government will deliver.
Regardless of the relative merits of your approaches, would you at least concede that $30 billion was, however you distribute it, is going to buy a lot more childcare than $2.6 billion?
This is about how we can help all families, how we can partner and give as much flexibility as possible to families now, not in the future. Mr. Trudeau likes to promise things many times, never delivering, often that aren't his area of jurisdiction. He says he hires doctors when he doesn't. He doesn't run daycare. So what we want to do is help all families. We want to help them immediately, and for lower income families, we feel we need to do more there, so we will cover 75% of the cost.
Next question.
Chris Reynolds, Canadian Press. You mentioned the plan to raise flags up that were lowered in remembrance of Indigenous children who died in residential schools on September 30th, the day of National Truth and Reconciliation. And you said that was to be done with an aim of building a better Canada in collaboration with Indigenous peoples. I'm wondering, have you consulted with any Indigenous leaders and communities about this choice to raise flags back up on September 30? For example, Wab Canoe in Manitoba has said that they should stay down on that day. So have you been in discussion with folks about that?
As I've said, September 30th will be the first annual recognition of Truth and Reconciliation Day in Canada, something in opposition we supported. When that coming together as a country is complete, we will then re-engage by raising our flags and recommitting to reconciliation and to building a better, stronger, more inclusive Canada. I've consulted literally every week or so with Indigenous leaders in my time as opposition leader because I've wanted to make sure that as Prime Minister, they know I will act. They know I will build partnerships, and they know I will try and make sure that after generations of studies, of positive words and promises by Mr. Trudeau, we will finally act in partnership to make real progress. As I've said, this will be an area that is very particularly important to me because we have to rebuild trust between First Nations and the federal government.
The economy added about 90,000 jobs in August, mostly in full-time and in the service sector. So we're within now like 0.8% of pre-pandemic levels, roughly, and things are trending upward on the jobs front. So I'm wondering why there is such an emphasis on creating 1 million jobs, and specifically, what kind of jobs are you talking about here?
Our economy is shrinking. The last data confirm that. We have some of the highest unemployment levels in the G7, our peer countries. We have record debt. In fact, Mr. Trudeau is spending $424 million more per day borrowing than we're bringing in. Canadians are worried about their future, and they should be. That's why we launched Canada's Recovery Plan with a relentless focus on job creation, helping troubled sectors, and putting upward pressure on wages. With our doubling of the Canada Workers' Benefit, we're going to give working families a $1 per hour raise with that commitment. We want people to get ahead. We want them to have a break. And that is what Canada's Recovery Plan is built on, fighting Justin Trudeau's inflation, reckless spending with no plan for the future.
Next question.
Isaac Callum, the Pointer. I want to ask about your plan to increase the Canada Health Transfer by 60 billion. If you can hear me over the train. The PBO's estimates show that in the first 5 years, your plan would deliver a fraction of that total amount. So can you help explain how you're going to deliver that funding in full? Are you backloading it to the second 5 years so that it is reliant on re-election? Can you explain that plan and how it will work to me, please?
I'm happy to answer your question. We have committed to stable, predictable funding for our public and universal system without conditions. Those are elements that the premiers have all been asking for. It will be a 6% increase per year. So of course, over the years, that will compound and be larger. But what this does is it represents the largest investment in our public system in a generation. It's a commitment to giving predictable increasing funding at record amounts to the provinces over a decade so that they can plan to build up tired and fatigued nurses, physicians, PSWs. It can help them build up gaps in long-term care. We've got an additional $3 billion for infrastructure investments they can draw on for long-term care. In addition to that, we're also committing to addiction treatment and a national mental health action plan. So health, the well-being of families and communities is at the core of Canada's Recovery Plan, as is partnering with the provinces.
And on Mississauga specifically, at the beginning of the campaign, Mississauga Mayor Bonnie Crombie wrote to you and laid out the city's demands and their needs ahead of the federal election. And so far, you're the only federal leader to reply. But your response, particularly on transit, was vague. You included the Eglinton West LRT extension in your promise, which is a Toronto project rather than Mississauga. So I want to push for something more specific and local. The city is looking to build a bus rapid transit route along Dundas Street, which is the second busiest transit corridor in Mississauga. There's a request in at the moment for federal funding. If you're elected and it meets basic eligibility criteria, will you commit to funding that project?
What I will commit to is being a partner to Mayor Crombie. And Mississauga, the GTA, is an incredible part of our national economy. The number of head offices we have here in Mississauga, I know from my time as a lawyer in the private sector, I was always seeing the growth and the dynamic economy here in Mississauga that has small and medium-sized players and some of the global multinationals that call Mississauga home for their operations in Canada. We want to see success. And for the commute times and for the Dundas transit project, we will try and be there as a partner. And part of our housing commitment is to also make sure that we push for density and more housing as part of our transit investments. We've got a very comprehensive plan to get 1 million homes built in 3 years, partnering with all levels of government as opposed to ignoring these issues and making them worse as Mr. Trudeau has.
Next question.
Mr. O'Toole, Steve Cornwell here from the Mississauga News. I want to ask you about your carbon pricing plan. You've outlined a carbon savings account, which would largely go to individuals and businesses, as far as I can tell. Cities like Mississauga and cities across Canada have come to rely on millions of dollars per year for infrastructure funding through the existing kind of carbon pricing plan. So how would you kind of fill up the gap and ensure that cities like Mississauga are actually getting the funding they need to not just keep infrastructure in working condition, but to build more aspirational projects?
Well, thank you for the question. As you mentioned, we have a plan that prices carbon, that meets our Paris commitments, and focuses on an economic recovery. We took a lot of time to get this right. We launched it in April. We will also partner with municipalities on building resiliency. We've already seen the impacts of climate change, and we need to make sure that there are funds and partnerships available for municipalities to act. What we've proposed with respect to our low carbon savings account and our plan to meet our Paris commitments is also about trying to re-engage in building partnerships between all levels of government. One thing that Mr. Trudeau is known for is an Ottawa knows best approach, even leading some provinces to take that approach to court. We want to work together to tackle issues from climate change right through to housing and other issues. So we're going to have what I've called a federalism of partnership after many years of division under Mr. Trudeau.
Thank you. And just a question about if you can put the crystal ball on for a second. The last election, 2019, there was a Liberal sweep of Mississauga. What would be different this time, do you think, that might sway voters into your direction?
Well, I'd like to ask folks of Mississauga, what has that gotten them? It's gotten them 6 years where the housing crisis has gotten worse. They've received not even a response to the mayor's request on infrastructure. It's led to a cost of living crisis where we see seniors on fixed income not even able to keep up with their bills. So our plan is about giving families in Mississauga and across the GTA a break. Get our economies, especially services, restaurants, some of the hardest hit sectors, back on their feet. We've got a plan for that. It's been a difficult time for our country, and we need a plan to get things back on track, and a prime minister that will do that. And for folks in Mississauga, it'll be a prime minister from the GTA if we can earn their trust. I would be the first prime minister from the Greater Toronto Area. I think for its importance to our national economy, I think that's a great thing as well.
This will be the last question. Ce sera la dernière question.
David Aiken, Global News. I kind of had the GTA stopping in Whitby, and okay, I'll give you Durham, but let's talk about that side of the GTA. You're in Whitby tonight. Whitby, of course, was the territory of your old friend Jim Flaherty when the Harper government happened. It's been Liberal since 2015. As you guys broke down, why did that riding go? I want you to talk about your political neighbors, Whitby. Why did you lose Whitby in 2015 and couldn't take it back in 2019? Why not Pickering? Why not Ajax? You've got Oshawa, you've got Durham. What is it about voters in Whitby that didn't come to your side last time?
Whitby's very important. As you know, David, Jim Flaherty was a bit of a political mentor to me, and I think our best finance minister in modern times. Mr. Trudeau has abandoned even trying to have a balanced budget. I often think about Jim's happy warrior commitment and try and draw some inspiration off that. Suburban families in the 905, whether in any part of the Durham region, whether in Peel, they deserve someone who's going to fight for them. There's a housing crisis. They're all worried their kids won't be able to live in Whitby or Brooklyn or Mississauga. They're worried about the cost of living. So not only do we have a plan, we have incredible candidates. Malia Shahid in Whitby is already on town council, a business person, a mother, a strong defender of economic growth and small businesses. I think she's going to make a spectacular member of parliament. Mike Raz, next to me here, another committed family to Mississauga and the community. Our candidates are a cross-section of incredible people from all backgrounds with one mission: Canada's recovery and securing our future.
If I look around suburban Regina, suburban Edmonton, suburban Calgary, suburban Winnipeg, I see suburban voters voting for Conservative candidates. And you know, this is along the same lines. For quite a while now, we haven't seen suburban voters in the GTA stretching all around vote Conservative. I mean, the carbon tax, commuters, right? Why wouldn't they be voting for Conservatives who promise to reduce a carbon tax? But they don't. Is it a cultural thing? Is it the demographics that are changing here in the GTA?
Well, I've said many times, we need to rebuild trust with some Canadians, including some suburban folks in Ontario. And we've worked very hard to do that with respect to the environment, That's why we put our plan out in April. With respect to an economic recovery, we have a plan to get Canada back on its feet. We want to meet the hopes, fears, and aspirations of Canada in 2021. We've got a new leader, we've got a plan, we've got incredible candidates, and I'm asking Canadians, take a look at the Conservative Party. Take a look at Canada's recovery plan. We're running a positive campaign based on delivering for you. Mr. Trudeau, we know, has let you down time after time after time. We can do better, we can secure our future, and I'm asking Canadians for their trust. On doit rétablir la confiance des Canadiens, des Québécois dans les banlieues. Ici, dans la grande région de Toronto, mais c'est la même chose à Montréal et à travers le pays. Et c'est pourquoi on a lancé notre politique sur l'environnement en avril. C'est pourquoi on a un plan pour le rétablissement dans toutes les régions. On a une équipe forte et expérimentée et prête pour les défis devant nous. Et j'invite tous les Canadiens, tous les Québécois d'examiner mon bilan, notre plan, et j'aimerais recevoir votre vote.
It will be all for today. Ce sera tout pour aujourd'hui. Merci.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.